After signing a few autographs, the waitress, I was just about to leave, she said, "You have to say hello to the cook." And I said, "I only play the big room." She said, "No."
She knows about the women. She's known for decades. The hotel rooms, the starlets, the dancers who traveled with him overseas. The affairs that weren't even whispered about anymore because everyone simply accepted them as fact. Bob Hope's infidelity isn't a rumor. It's practically a job requirement, written into the rhythm of his career like applause breaks and cue cards. And Dolores Hope, elegant, Catholic, composed, does nothing. She doesn't leave. She doesn't threaten. She doesn't even make him choose. For 69 years, she stays. The world calls it devotion, but devotion doesn't explain the calculation in her silence. Devotion doesn't explain the fortune she controls, the power she quietly amasses, or the cold strategic patience that lets her outlive every mistress, every scandal, every younger woman who thought she had a chance. This isn't a love story. It's a long game, and Dolores Hope played it better than anyone. The question isn't whether Bob Hope was unfaithful. The question is why his wife refused to give him the exit he never quite asked for. Start with what most people assume. They see a dutiful Catholic wife trapped by religion, social pressure, and the era she was born into. A woman who stayed because leaving wasn't an option. A victim of Hollywood's golden age when divorce meant scandal, and wives were expected to look the other way while their husbands built empires. That story is tidy, it's sympathetic, and it's almost entirely wrong. Because Dolores Hope wasn't paralyzed by her vows, she was protected by them. The marriage that looked like a cage from the outside was a fortress from within. And the moment you understand what she stood to lose by leaving, you realize she was never trapped at all. Dolores Reed meets Bob Hope in 1933. She's a nightclub singer in New York, beautiful and trained, performing at the Vogue Club when he walks in. He's already a star on the rise, sharp-tongued and restless, the kind of comedian who works every room like it owes him something. They marry within months. It's fast, romantic, reckless in the way young marriages are when fame is still a thrill and not yet a weapon. She believes in him. He believes in the version of himself she reflects back. For a little while, that's enough. But here's what she learns early. Bob Hope doesn't slow down. Not for her, not for anyone. His career is a machine, and he feeds it constantly. Radio, film, live shows, benefits, tours, overseas performances for the troops. He's gone more than he's home. And when he's gone, he's not alone. The affairs start almost immediately. Chorus girls, co-stars, women whose names she'll never know because they don't matter enough to remember. She's still in her 20s when she realizes the marriage she thought she had doesn't actually exist. The question is what she does with that knowledge. Most women in her position make one of two moves. They leave and lose everything, or they stay and disappear into bitterness, resentment, and quiet irrelevance. Dolores does neither. She doesn't fight Bob for his attention. She doesn't compete with the women. She doesn't even pretend to believe his denials. Instead, she shifts her focus. If Bob Hope is going to build an empire, she'll make sure she's the one holding the deed. What almost nobody talks about is how early Dolores begins acquiring power. Not loud public power, not the kind Bob wields on stage or in front of cameras. Quiet, structural, financial power, the kind that doesn't make headlines but determines who controls the estate when the applause finally dies. She starts making real estate investments in the 1940s. While Bob is performing for soldiers and filming road pictures with Bing Crosby, Dolores is buying property. Land in Toluca Lake, a sprawling estate in Palm Springs, commercial developments in the San Fernando Valley. She's not just spending his money, she's converting his fame into assets that appreciate while he ages. This is the move most people miss. Dolores doesn't fight the mistresses because the mistresses are temporary. They get nights, she gets California. By the 1950s, Bob Hope is one of the biggest stars in the world. He's hosting the Oscars, touring with USO shows, making specials for NBC, performing for presidents. His fame is so large, it stops feeling like fame and starts feeling like infrastructure. And Dolores is his wife in name, but in practice, she's something closer to a CEO. She manages the houses, she oversees the staff, she handles the money, the investments, the charitable foundations that will one day bear their name. She's not waiting in the wings for Bob to come home and love her. She's building a financial kingdom that doesn't require his fidelity to function. She adopts 4 children with Bob. The decision is partly faith, partly image, partly something softer she doesn't talk about publicly. But the children also serve another function. They root her position. She's not just Bob Hope's wife. She's the mother of his children. She's the center of his family, the respectable anchor to his public image. Every affair he has makes her look more dignified by contrast. Every scandal he narrowly avoids reminds the world that Dolores is the reason he still has a home to return to. The cruelty of this arrangement is that Dolores never gets what she wanted at the start. She doesn't get the marriage. She doesn't get the man. She doesn't even get the pretense of fidelity. But she gets something else. Control, wealth, social standing, a legacy. And she decides, very early, that those things are worth more than pride. Here's what Bob's mistresses don't understand, and it's the reason none of them ever replace her. They think they're competing for Bob's heart. They're not. Dolores gave up on his heart decades ago. What they're actually competing for is his estate, his name, his empire. And that fight was over before they ever entered it. Dolores didn't win Bob Hope. She won the marriage. And in California, in that era, with that kind of wealth accumulation, the marriage is everything. The affairs continue for decades. There's Marilyn Maxwell, the singer and actress who everyone knows is more than a friend. There are the beautiful young women who travel with Bob overseas, called secretaries or assistants in the press, but understood by everyone to be something else. There are flings so numerous and so casual that Bob himself probably loses count. And through all of it, Dolores says nothing publicly. She attends premieres, she poses for photos, she supports his tours. She smiles in exactly the way a loyal wife is expected to smile. But here's the detail people miss. She's not silent because she's weak. She's silent because speaking would cost her. A divorce would mean splitting assets. It would mean scandal. It would mean losing her position, her influence, her access to the fortune she helped build. Worse, it would mean admitting that the marriage was a failure. And Dolores Hope does not fail. She adapts, she endures, she waits. And waiting in this case is the smartest move she can make. Some biographers suggest Dolores stayed because of her Catholic faith. And yes, she's devout and she attends Mass regularly. She doesn't believe in divorce the way some people don't believe in ghosts. It's not a moral position, it's a fact of her universe. But faith doesn't explain the coldness of her strategy. Faith doesn't explain why she pushes Bob to keep working into his 80s and 90s, long past the point where it's healthy or necessary. Faith doesn't explain why she tightly controls access to him in his final years, making sure the family, the estate, and the legacy remain exactly as she's designed them. Here's where the story gets uncomfortable. Because if you look closely, you start to see that Dolores isn't a victim of Bob Hope's cruelty. She's a co-architect of the system that enabled it. She never leaves, yes, but she also never forces him to change. She creates a marriage where fidelity is optional and presence is negotiable as long as the money keeps flowing and the image stays intact. In some ways, she needs his affairs. They justify her detachment. They give her moral high ground. They let her be both the wronged woman and the powerful wife. She plays both roles brilliantly. Bob Hope dies in 2003 at the age of 100. He's been declining for years, mentally and physically, but the public image holds until the very end. Dolores is by his side. She's 94 years old, still sharp, still composed. When he passes, she doesn't weep publicly. She doesn't collapse. She manages the funeral, the tributes, the eulogies with the same smooth control she's wielded for 70 years. And when the estate is finally settled, it's worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Almost all of it is in her name. She lives another 8 years. In that time, she gives away much of the fortune. Donations to churches, hospitals, and charities, all carefully structured to maximize their legacy and her control over how the Hope name is remembered. She dies in 2011 at the age of 102. By the time she's gone, she's outlived Bob by nearly a decade. She's outlived the mistresses, she's outlived the scandals, she's outlived everyone who thought they understood the marriage from the outside. So here's the real answer to the question this story asks. Dolores Hope didn't refuse to divorce Bob Hope because she couldn't. She refused because divorce would have cost her everything she'd spent a lifetime building. The marriage wasn't a prison, it was a contract, and she honored that contract not out of love, but out of strategy, faith, and a cold understanding of what power actually looks like when you're a woman in Hollywood's golden age. She didn't fight the mistresses because she didn't need to. She owned the house, she owned the land, she owned the legacy. The women Bob Hope slept with got pieces of him. Dolores Hope got everything else. The women who passed through Bob's life thought they were stealing something from Dolores. They weren't. They were rented. Dolores was permanent. And permanence, in the end, beats passion every time. Look at the marriage one more time, now that you know how it ends. It's 1933 again. Dolores Reed is young, talented, in love with a man who makes her laugh. She doesn't know yet what's coming. She doesn't know about the affairs, the loneliness, the decades of calculated silence. But even if you could go back and tell her, even if you could show her every betrayal waiting in the future, would she make a different choice? Probably not. Because Dolores Hope didn't want a perfect marriage. She wanted to win, and she did. The price she paid wasn't her dignity. It was her intimacy. But intimacy doesn't buy property in Palm Springs. It doesn't endow hospitals or fund scholarships or make sure your name outlasts your husband's scandals. Dolores Hope understood something most people never admit. Sometimes survival isn't about being loved. It's about being the last one standing. In Hollywood, there are stories about women destroyed by their husband's fame. This isn't one of them. This is a story about a woman who turned betrayal into a balance sheet and won.